Generalists should be able to be flexible to whatever situation. They should be the most adaptable. A specialist can be the same way, but most likely they're going to be incredibly flexible within their bubble.
Welcome to The Cabin, a podcast where we interview diverse minds to learn about their paths to building skills and creative confidence. I'm Sid.
And I'm Ibra. Let's dive in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Ibra from The Cabin. Today, we have an awesome guest today, Connor Skelly. Connor is a B2B marketing, analytics, and content stud, a former founder of a music panel called Beyond the Music, and lastly was a marketing director for Brightfield Group. These days, Connor provides freelancing marketing consulting full-time. Connor, welcome to The Cabin.
Thank you. Thanks guys for having me.
Yeah, man. So how's your Monday been so far?
It's actually been really good. We may get into this a bit later, but it's part of my sort of freelance, leaving my full-time job thing. I've been getting a lot more into day trading, and today was a really good day for me. So I'm gonna ride that success for, until tomorrow morning, I suppose.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so let's kind of dive into that a little bit quick before we kind of dive into our own questions. Can you kind of break down more of your career journey and kind of origin story overall?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated from DePaul in 2016 with a degree in marketing. I just kind of went into that field. I didn't go to DePaul originally for marketing. I went in undecided, and then that was just something that kind of clicked with me. I liked it. I wanted to go into the music business that way. And then, I had this internship as I was graduating college with a company called Axiom, which was like a marketing data and technology services company. And I was jumped in right away with like marketing strategy, doing some like Twitter stuff, kind of like in quote unquote intern things, but also like my boss did a fantastic job of like making sure I was involved in like executive strategy meetings and things like that. Like I'm taking notes, but like that was the mindset that I had, or the environment that I was in, like off the bat with my marketing career. And then, they brought me on full time as soon as I graduated, and I was doing like campaign management and paid social. I was supporting like Google ads and some like third-party email type of stuff, but then went into like onboarding or implementing a marketing attribution platform across our like billion-dollar organization, helping build out like from nothing a sales development rep structure within our marketing team. And then most of my team got laid off like a year later. So from there, I went to a healthcare analytics company. I've kind of been in B2B pretty much my whole career, where I'm doing similar stuff, mainly email and events. And then I quit that job, went full-time freelancing because I had some work building up, thought I could do it. And then I worked with Brightfield Group for a few years, built out their marketing function from scratch, and had a really awesome time. And recently left to sort of address the whole I don't really know what I want to do next thing, which I think a lot of people are there right now, and just trying out some stuff, keeping my freelance business going a little bit, but keeping things flexible.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, I have a few questions in that in particular. So like you as an intern were able to work for like this big company and kind of do all these massive campaigns. How is that even possible? Like what was that process even getting that?
Yeah, so I was being brought on as part of just a brand new marketing team for this division. And it was one of three divisions in the company that netted the largest revenue. And they were set to do like this huge thought leadership campaign, which ended up being the largest campaign in the company's history. And so it was myself, my boss, one other person, and then a couple other people that were kind of like tangentially involved from another division that I didn't really work with as much at first. But it was pretty much like just us building out this original like thought leadership content that was an ebook and a webinar. And then there was like a 3-year marketing plan that we were building also aside from that. So I was doing a lot of transcribing, a lot of note taking in meetings, but I also wrote some of the social media section. I know it's small, but the social media section I wrote and just came up with some of the demand gen stuff too. And so I was pretty empowered early on to show up, because there wasn't many of us, despite, the company was like 3,500 people at the time, but there was only really like 4 or 5 dedicated people on the team.
Got it. And so this goes like social media and like demand gen marketing. Were those the things you want to kind of tap into more, like especially with your interest in music, for example, that you want to like learn those skills to kind of get more into the music industry?
I really didn't know. like I said, I gravitated towards marketing because I understood it. Like I'm interested in business. I'm interested in marketing. I'm interested in kind of anything that touches that sort of. And you learn the different topics and concepts and things like that in school, from like social media to branding to all that. But when I was exiting school, or I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, I figured I would do something on like the brand side or like agency side, something like that, where you do more of that creative marketing sort of stuff that people think about, like the emotions and all of that. Like that was more of the stuff that I thought I would be doing. But I got this job. I was fortunate to be in a position to get this job, and it was very much like the data and the tech side. That was what we sold. And so I was able to really understand the back end of marketing a lot more, which has obviously just absolutely exploded since then. So, there was still social media, there was still branding, there was still like all that type of stuff. But because of the business that we were, I was also able to really understand a very large scope of what marketing can mean for an organization.
For sure. I know, Sid, like you also had kind of similar kind of background when it came, but specifically for like market research, was that right? If I got that correct.
Yeah, funny enough, like I have almost like a totally different lens to it, almost the opposite of what Connor's describing, right? Like I came from a brand and agency world. I was lucky enough though, I think like that I had worked at a startup and done some research, market research, like early on. So I was able to start thinking like that. But I think it's so interesting to your point, like Connor, this is all exploding, right? Like MarTech and just really understanding whether that's marketing ops or revenue ops. I guess what I would ask is like, yeah, what made you gravitate towards that? And it seems like you're also taking that one step further instead of, going back towards brand or something else. Curious why.
Well, I mean, I'm like a fan of tech, I guess, generally. Like I kind of gravitate towards that type of stuff, and then just kind of understanding new technologies. And I'm also, that company got me pretty passionate about like consumer data and what consumer data, where that industry is going and how that kind of shapes how nations and businesses work. That got me really interested in it. But I was able to kind of, get those new interests, which definitely relate to marketing and things like that. But also I was able to have the experience of, they pretty much would throw me at anything. And I was like, oh, well, this is still marketing. Like I'm still like doing this. I'm just doing it for a different thing. So I think a lot of people's experience when they come out of school is they go into like an agency or something like that, or they go into a company and they do one thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's just more common. But with me, it was like I was touching everything all at once, and I didn't really like. I had some things that I liked, but I didn't really care either way, because like we're still talking about like the branding in our social media accounts, or like the branding in our email stuff. So like it's all intertwined,
Yeah, I think it's a good one. And it's also kind of, to me, the bridge between like strategy and execution. So yeah, I guess like how would you say you learned a lot of these skills? It seems like a lot of it was on the job, but is there anything else, you would recommend others or things that you've
Yeah, I'd say it was probably like 70% on the job, just like trial by fire constantly on stuff. And it doesn't matter how well resourced your organization is, you can definitely still live in a trial by fire when you're on small teams too. And so I think a lot of it was that marketing is inherently a testing environment of a discipline. And so it's always just doing something, whether you have a strategy or not, and then going back, doing your retrospective and seeing like, okay, what went wrong, whatever, and just repeating that process. So a lot of it was experience, was through, like just osmosis, just being in the room of people that were talking about this stuff. For our ebook, for that first big campaign, we had a few like pretty significant like thought leaders in the space at the time. And so they went into our office, and we paid them a bunch of money to help advise us on like this content, but also help advise us on like our business strategy and where this division was going. And so I think he more or less just participated in like the interview for the ebook, but like Scott Brinker, who's at HubSpot, like the grandfather of MarTech, who created chiefmartech.com, like he was in the same room. And so like I knew, I'm like just starting out, and I like kind of know who this guy is, but I followed him since then, and I've learned like so much around marketing technology and org structure and like trends around that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of it was through osmosis. You learn stuff in school, right? But it's concepts usually, and it can really vary from class to class or professor to professor. So a lot of it was experience.
Yeah, so I kind of see like this theme. I definitely agree to that point that marketing is definitely a field where you like to test and like really trial and error a lot of things. And this kind of takes us to this point of like this concept of being a generalist overall, right? Marketing and field in general is a very generalist type of position to be in any industry. So I'm kind of curious, and like we talked about this like kind of off camera before, because we had a person on our podcast actually, for example, who was considered a specialist, right? He's an SEO specialist by his day career, but has like a side SEO business. And he told us how hard it was for him as a journalist to like sell and explain their skills. Of course, it's doable, but it's not the most easiest thing. And
Right.
since you told me like you consider yourself as a journalist, how do you explain that like to, let's say, a prospect client or just in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I found, because I 100% understand, that SEO specialists challenge, right? Like it can be hard because as we talked about, kind of just before we started recording here, like you want to have like a single value prop. Like what's that one sentence that's going to have people understand what you're talking about or what you're selling or what you're writing, whatever it is. And so that's harder to do as a generalist because you're like, well, I do everything. Like that's not helpful to businesses in most cases, right? It's not helpful to businesses. But where I've really, fine-tuned my pitch and what I found success in is primarily rooted in the people that I'm talking to. So that pitch just works a lot better for small businesses that don't really have much of a marketing program, or they may have like they may have some stuff stood up, but it's all like it's all held together with glue and toothpicks or they have nothing, right? And so what the value that I've been able to provide to companies like that is like, we can go in any direction here. I've touched all of it. I've seen how starting with some things can hurt other things, or I've seen how like which levers you need to pull at the right times, depending on the business goals, the market, budget, like all that type of stuff. I've experienced like which of these levers you have to pull. But at the end of the day, like you're trying to activate yesterday. So we can start on one thing at any time and then start to build out systems and more scalability by adding on other things that a generalist would be better fit at, because they at least have some surface level knowledge of how those things interact together. I have pretty surface level knowledge of like everything in marketing, but there are some things that I have like much deeper expertise in, just depending on what it is. And so usually like when I'm talking to like startup founders or things like that, when they're just like, hey, like I'm thinking about hiring, this type of person, I'm always like, well, what have you done so far? What's your team like right now? And then if they're like, well, we know that email works really, really well for us. It's like, okay, then you may want to hire like an email specialist. You may want to hire someone who's like incredibly good at that, if you have someone that's able to, wear a few more hats and cover everything else. So I typically tell people, like, when you know something is working, that's when you start to bring in the specialists that are able to build that out more. If you don't know what's working, you don't have data, you don't have experience, bring people in that can at least get the work done and can speak to everything.
Got it. And yeah, like, and something that you told me like off camera before too, like when it came to you actually hiring people as a marketing director, that's something that you actually looked out for. You typically find journalists first and then those with specialties. Can you kind of dive into more like that kind of strategy in between, like how that works out?
My thought process on that. Yeah, so I think it's sort of a middle of the road, like a best of both worlds sort of decision, because when I was doing that, I was a team of one, and my thought process was two things. One, who do I need to hire to move the needle the most? So in that case, that's more of that specialist sort of mindset. But then the other side, I'm like, what is the biggest time suck? Like what, because I have a million other things on my plate. What is just taking up the most time? And for me, it was content. So I brought on a content specialist that would manage social media, support some blog writing, and it was just a lot of writing and a lot of like tactical day-to-day stuff. And that was my biggest time suck, but that was what was going to move the needle for us, because we found I was building out a content strategy at the time that I thought would work well, and I would need someone like fully dedicated to helping build out that content strategy, which did ultimately work out. So like we did that, and then the two other people that I hired later on were a growth marketer who could kind of tackle some of the email stuff, but like start to build out some of that scalability and get more rigorous about testing, because we had so much content. It got to the point where we were just bloated with content, but we needed someone with more of a performance growth mindset to know, like, we need to kill this, we need to only emphasize this, we need to tighten this ship up. And then we hired a graphic designer because our content specialist was like she wasn't a trained designer. She's fantastic with her work, but she was like, I cannot keep doing this. So for her, it was like, what's her biggest time suck? Generalists should be able to be flexible to whatever situation. They should be the most adaptable. A specialist can be the same way, but most likely they're going to be incredibly flexible within their bubble. But they're going to be able to go incredibly deep within that field, much deeper than most generalists would. So I think everyone should be able to, regardless of if you're okay at something, or if you have some level of knowledge, or you have very deep level of knowledge, you should be able to speak to like short, medium, long-term goals or programs that you should be implementing. Whether they're well-informed or not, will depend on your experience and the team you're working with and the information you have on hand. But I think, you should be able to at least speak to that regardless of your surface, your knowledge. What would you consider like yourselves?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Generalist kind of makes more sense. At least for me personally, I'm the kind of type where I like to kind of get my hands in different kind of things just to get a better sense of it. But of course, if I know someone is better, I'm not afraid to allocate responsibility or see someone who is a specialist to kind of dive deep into those different roles.
No, I definitely see myself as a generalist. I feel like I've spent a lot of time specializing at this point, funny enough, like whether that's content strategy or some of my old roles, but like, I don't know, similar to you, Connor, I feel like I've worked for like very small, like you said, mom and pop shops that like don't know where their next buck is going to be. They just have a product and they know they need some sort of marketing support.
Right.
So I think like those kind of situations actually help me a lot because it's like, yeah, we have to come up with the whole plan from scratch and execute it. So it's like, there's a lot of learnings there. There's a lot of failures along the way. Curious. Yeah, I guess like that could be a question. Like, what are those like for you? Like, is there any opportunities where you're like, wow, this really didn't work the way I thought it would, and you had to pivot? I'm looking at a long list of, some of your clients and stuff. Like, can you reflect on any of those experiences?
I can't think of like specific instances, but I know they probably related to paid ads. Like especially early on, I've done most of my like paid media work has been in LinkedIn. So I'd say that's definitely my strong suit of like how to build effective paid LinkedIn strategies. That's just something I've done the most. That's where I'd be most comfortable. But like, yeah, probably like, paid search or early on LinkedIn, like just making so many mistakes, like, and just not testing enough, not building out more audiences, like thinking that like this sort of massive net that we're trying to catch is the right thing, is the right audience, whatever, which can be the right thing. But did I have a strong reasoning as to why I was doing that? No. I was just trying to bring cost per click down or, whatever it was. I was just trying to bring some metrics down, but was actually moving the needle. That's where more of that, you need to put more thought into that kind of stuff. So I'd say paid media was definitely something early on where I was like, oh, I can do that because I understand it. I did it a lot for myself, for my own like side projects and things like that. But I mean, when you're working with a client or you're working internally and you have much more people like beholden to you, it's an entirely different dynamic. So yeah, I'd pick that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you kind of covered this, but like, where do you feel like your freelance career was born? Like, is it right before, the music came into play, or where did it start?
I got a funny answer to this. I talked to Ibra about it when we first talked, but I mean, I've always been gravitated more towards like an entrepreneurial sort of mindset, just kind of starting projects, starting small businesses, like things like that since I was in high school. But I was at this company, my second company, and I just like I didn't hate the work. I wasn't a fan of like the company and the team and things like that. And so I was just like considering maybe I could do something else. And then and I had never like quit a job before. So, and then around the same time is when I discovered Gary Vee. And say what you want about that guy, right? Like today I find him incredibly annoying and very repetitive and things like that. That being said, I think he does serve a purpose for a lot of people in a specific point in their life. And so I had discovered him when I was considering leaving my job, which is like all he talks about. And I was like, I just recently moved to a new apartment. I was living by myself for the first time. And so I was very much just in this like do it yourself like control your destiny sort of mentality. Or that was something that like I was gravitating towards, and he happened to show my Instagram feed one day, and that's kind of like what accelerated it. And I had gotten connected with I had some people in my network, some founders that were looking for marketing help, and I had some of that freelance business building at the time. But I would say from like a psychological like motivator standpoint, Gary Vee.
Got it. So you're one of the hustle porn guys. Got it.
Yeah, I was. I ate that up for a while, and then once you like kind of go away from it for a bit, once you like realize you don't need it, it's like the worst thing in the world, and you hate seeing it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I go through my cycles, right? Sometimes you need that boost, right? I don't know. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So I guess that the next question kind of comes like pretty naturally, but like, yeah, I mean, so what are you up to now, right? It seems like you're kind of sitting out on your own. You're day trading. You're exploring new things. Like, can you tell us more about that?
So I've been out of my last job for about like 5 weeks now. And, I have a couple freelance clients right now. It's probably like 15 hours a week, roughly. So, it's not a ton of work, just kind of doing something to keep the lights on, make me feel better, like rent and all that stuff. But yeah, I've been into like investing in like personal finance, things like that for a long time. But me and a friend of mine have just been getting more into that, and sort of figured might as well try it. My dad, who's a financial planner, was like, you better do it now because you're not going to want to do it when you're older. So I was like, yeah, all right, I'll try that out. And there's some other kind of topics that I've been wanting to get into. I've started to get into NFTs. Who hasn't? So I'm kind of just like learning about that, and kind of learning about just like future of tech and kind of community-based, just like very like online communities and how that stuff is growing, and just learning more about that. And I've also wanted to just become a more disciplined writer. So I think that's a skill that can cross all kinds of disciplines and all kinds of personal and professional goals. So that's probably the last thing that I'll want to hone in on more, because I like doing it. I just suck at sitting down and actually doing it. So hopefully this newsletter will hold me accountable a little bit that I'm doing.
Yeah. I mean, Ibra and I have been doing it for what, like 4 months. And I can tell you that that's the least it does, right? Like you got a newsletter to publish, people are looking for it. You got to write it, even if it's not looking for it. Right.
Right. And having another person is nice too, because it's like, hopefully both of you aren't lazy about it, but I'm sure that happens eventually.
Yeah. No, I think like that is what's fun about it. Like you get to bounce ideas off each other and have someone to help when when it gets tough. But yeah.
I actually want to ask you a question. It kind of goes a little bit backtracking, but like, I guess I want to kind of see your opinion, because you, Connor, have done this a few times in your career. Like you've worked and like you kind of took a break, started like a nonprofit, then you went back to a corporate job or like a more like stable career job, and then now you're again freelancing. So I'm kind of curious, like for someone that wants to like do that, quit their job. Sorry, my cat might be in the shot. Sorry.
We started fostering a cat today, so he may show up in the background at some point.
Yeah, sorry, she's gonna be like running around. But we're gonna say, so like for someone who wants to like quit their job or do their own thing, like how did you map that out? Like, is there a certain like amount of money you have to save? Is some like skills you have to have like in place, relationships, all the above? Like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say all of the above. I mean, everyone is in their own situation. Everyone's got their own. Everyone's got their own different resources. Everyone's got their own privilege and all that kind of stuff. But my approach with it was, can I support myself, assuming no income for 6 months? I think that's just a good finance practice that everyone should hope to achieve. Can I do that? Can I start to build up at least a bit of a pipeline before I do leave? Can I commit to some work? So this time around, before I really committed to leaving, I wanted to make sure I had one signed contract before I let my team know. And so if I had to work late and make sure that I got that freelance work done on time while also doing the full-time job, like, so be it. Sid, I know that's like your day-to-day or at least it was for a long period of time. So, if that was my situation, fine, but it would have just made me feel a lot better. So, for me, it was definitely making sure I had some it skewed more financial, I think. Like I have the network. It could always get better. But I think I know a lot of the people that I can reach out to for that kind of stuff, and Twitter and LinkedIn are great tools for that. And so I just wanted to make sure I wasn't completely screwed financially, especially like now that I live with someone and we have responsibilities and things like that. But also like I didn't want to, because ideally half of a freelancers work is doing their own business development. So I didn't want to make that 100% of my time off the bat because I knew that I would get burned out really quickly.
For sure. Yeah, like in terms of like when you actually do structure a lot of your businesses, how do you structure your time most of the time? Was it like you got like set hours when it came to different contracts you have? Like, was it?
Yeah, I get into, wait, are you asking like, how do I structure the actual work themselves, or like personally, how do I just structure my day-to-day?
Both.
Both, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, for my like day-to-day, it's honestly in phases. Like I'll usually, it's like beginning of the month, I'm like, all right, new month, it's gonna be great. I'll plan out like my whole week, and then it completely breaks down by like Thursday, and then I never pick it up for the rest of the month. I'll usually just like Sunday night, I'll like plan things for the night. I'll like check my calendar, and then I'll like plan some stuff, but it's usually pretty flexible in my day-to-day. I kind of like it like that. And as far as like, structuring work with clients, it definitely depends on the type of work. Ideally for me, getting something like a fixed monthly rate, like a monthly retainer, or like a project-based type of contract is more ideal for me. It's just the type of work that I do because I don't know how many hours something can take a lot of times, especially if you don't know, even if the client doesn't know kind of the ins and outs of their marketing system, if it exists. And so, and plus like it's usually more cost effective for clients, and the peace of mind for me knowing that I have that fixed rate is more valuable than the hourly rate. Like I could charge people a ton of money and do the hourly rate and do it that way, but I don't think that would make clients happy, and that's just an extra thing that I have to think about. So that's typically my goal with it. But other types of work are definitely better for hourly, but for me, I just kind of prefer like, let's just do this for 3 months, or let's accomplish this one thing for XYZ rate.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I did hourly my like first freelance job ever. Actually it's funny. I was working at a startup for a few months. First time I got to kind of wear all hats. They liked my writing the most, so they're like, "Hey, while you're finishing up senior year of college, like, do you want to be a writer for us?" And it was an hourly rate. But yeah, I after a few months, I was like, I don't really want to manage the hourly part of it. I'd rather just deliver quality work. So then it became project-based and then eventually contract-based. And I think that's the way to go. Like, I think a lot of people end up selling themselves short, and then they think that there's this like huge gap between what they need to do to get to contract work. And I mean, to them, they like, just do it. Like, just ask for it. It's like a sales thing. Like, you just got to ask for it from your clients. And oftentimes they're just going to, if you're really delivering value for them.
Yeah. I mean, most of the people that I talked to recently, they're like, well, what do you want? Like, do you do hourly? Do you do project? And I'm like, I prefer project-based. And they're like, fine. Because like, again, like everyone's situation is different. All disciplines are a bit different, but I think hourly work, to your point, Sid, like it sort of disincentivizes you in a lot of cases. Like whether you think about it or not, like you're probably slacking a little bit to get those extra hours in there, but that's not what's best for you, because that kills your creativity and your mental health over time. And it's not what's good for the client or their budget or the kind of work you want to deliver. So yeah, I think structuring it based on like, hey, just pay me this much and I'll dedicate however much time. You can cap it. I put caps on, like hourly caps on contracts, where I'll just keep things, I'll like notate things separately. If, X amount per month, max this hours. And then sometimes I'll add on, like, if there's anything else that you need, this is the hourly rate that I charge. And then I'll just tack that onto the invoice. Because that way it builds trust. It lets people know that you're there and you want to help them. And yeah, also just being like a kind of a consultant or like an implementation or like an operator sort of position. Operator, you're there to like solve a problem or do the work, right? Consultant is more just like, it's a loose term, but it's usually just sort of advise in a lot of cases. But the mindset for me is just fire myself from this job, right? Like I want to educate people on what I'm doing, educate the client on what I'm doing, because chances are I'm not going to be there forever. So I'm going to teach you everything that I'm doing, whether you want to listen to me or not. And if you take value from it, great, you'll keep me on, because you don't want to have to think about anyone else doing this. So usually I'm really transparent with clients and that kind of stuff, and helping them build out systems and telling them like what they should do next, because it does act as a nice sales tool, you know, because it's like, well, here's what's coming. It's sort of like that agency model, but not as, I don't know, predatory. I guess that's one word to use, but it builds trust, right? It's like, look, like I want you guys to succeed, because if you do, then I do, and it just makes things a bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a similar vein, like I feel like as a freelancer, it's easy to get sucked up in the trap of like, I'm trading my time for money. And then it's like, you know, like if you're really a business, or if you're really trying to do this to build your own skills and just like have enough money to be happy, then it's like, you know, it's a whole different ballgame, right? It doesn't really matter. Like, and I guess the question to that is like, yeah, like what motivates you, or what gets you up in the morning to do this kind of work? Like where do you find the gratification, the dopamine hits?
Yeah. When I first decided to go into freelancing, maybe it was definitely a lot of confidence, but there was definitely some arrogance for sure of being like, oh, I can do this myself. Like I can pitch myself as a marketer to any company, most companies, and sell them, you know, a list of 5 different things or something. Like I could do that. I can manage that myself. And I wanted to have control over my work. You know, I was 24 or something, I think, when I did that, 23, 24. And so like, I'm a toddler, right? And, you know, so there's definitely a bit of arrogance there, but I just had a very strong feeling of like having that ownership over my work and the flexibility around that. And that trend, I think, culturally has just continued to grow. And so I think there's definitely a part of that this time around, but I learned a lot the first time I did it. So that's always a nice thing about freelancing, is like, it is essentially just kind of a safety net if you have that experience, because you can always go back to it. And so I definitely had that this time around. I think a lot of what like can motivate me now is just the people that I'm working with and kind of what we're doing. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of been where it's more exciting. Like, do I like the projects that I'm working on, and do I like the product? Do I like the company? And that is a nice motivator. But I think at the end of the day, it's the control of the situation.
So, and with that, like, as you mentioned earlier, like mental health, like how do you like manage that, like for yourself? Like, how do you keep yourself like not overwhelmed, but like just overall mentally healthy?
Yeah, my first week after leaving my last job, I was super anxious the whole week, because I had 2 freelance clients. And so that was like, monthly income box was checked, but I'm like, I had like 3 more inbound requests for like work that week. And I'm just scrolling through Twitter and I'm like seeing potential opportunities. And so like one of the second client that I got was actually just like through a DM that I messaged someone, and I'm like, wait, I am purposely leaving my job to like take my mind off of this stuff and like not work for a bit. So I was shooting myself a little bit in the foot, but that first week I was just really anxious. Like, I just had a really strong feeling to go out and get more work, because that's just, I guess, kind of how I am. But by the second week, I like was taking, you know, longer bike rides, like just hanging out, sitting, you know, without my phone at the lake for a while. And I was like, all right, I need to do more of a concerted effort to take my mind off of this stuff. And now, you know, now a few more weeks in, I think I'm finding a better balance to it.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I kind of want to take a little step back a little bit more, because whenever I talk about this like in person too, like off air, I mean, can you kind of explain a little bit more like your process about creating your own like music, you know, non-profit panel, like?
Oh, sure, yeah. So that idea came out of, well, two parts. One, it was just boredom from my first job. I was like it was just got to a point in a couple of projects where I like wasn't doing a lot day to day email. And so I'm like, okay, I need to fill my time. And then the other side of it was I just have a bunch of friends that work in the music industry, but that work more so behind the scenes. So, you know, audio engineers or photographers, or, you know, they work with venues or booking or, you know, things like that. And so I would talk to them about that stuff because I'm interested in it. And the common thread out here is it's just difficult for them to like continue to progress their career. You know, unless you start out like in your early 20s working with like Live Nation or like AEG or like some of these large companies that a lot of them really don't want to work for, like, then it's harder to just grow the career yourself, because you don't have that like so we're talking about it here, like that business, that personal business development, like that know-how or that network, or even how to approach getting that network. It seems like second nature to the three of us because we've been through the ringer and in terms of like schooling, and that's just been drilled into our heads for so long. But for a lot of people, it's not like that. So I wanted to create an organization that worked with those people and created like content and programming to help them grow their careers. So we put on a good amount of events. There was like, the first one was like a networking sort of meeting or events where we had a lot of different types of people speak from all different areas and talked about what they did, lessons learned, that type of stuff. We did some events that were like very topic specific for people that wanted to learn more about the space. And yeah, I did a lot on social. I did a lot with the blog, doing interviews with people and just growing it that way. And so I eventually wanted to get like an official 501c6, which is, I think 501c3 is like the normal nonprofit that most people think of, but the 501c6 is more of like a business connector sort of organization where it's able to provide more benefits directly to LLCs or to businesses. And so I wanted that organization to be like a sort of a nonprofit backbone to the Chicago music business industry, where it would be a great like connector for a lot of these businesses. And so I had a pretty cool vision for it, but my interest in it eventually just died out. Like I was starting to build more of a community around it, and that was exhausting. Just like, because that's, I mean, I don't know if you guys know about, well, one, like community building, but two, just like Slack stuff or like Discord or that type, like it's a daily thing that you just got to keep at and bring people in on. And most days it's tough. So I was just burnt out, and for a couple months, I kind of marinated on it and things. I had like a newsletter too. There was so much. And then I was just like, all right, I'm done with this. I'm gonna shelf it. And yeah, I turned off auto renewal on my domain for it like a week ago. So that means it's real.
I love that. That's like the sign of a marketer, right? Like how many domains have you had to get rid of? Because that's how you know you.
Oh yeah, I'll just buy up domains. I'm like, that'll be something, and then it's not, yeah. Yeah. So no, that was a really fun thing. It was definitely like an itch that I wanted to scratch of like carving out my own niche in the music industry outside of being like a musician or working on the business side. That was a really fun experience. And I met a lot of cool people. Who knows, maybe it can get brought back. But yeah, I think for the most part, I definitely scratched that itch.
Yeah, that's awesome. They're able to like pursue that, like even think that you could find your own niche and path to get into it in the first place. So yeah, kudos to you there. So I kind of, speaking of music, it's like, what kind of music are you into these days? Like, do you like follow like upcoming artists like that or anything like?
I used to be so good at it. So good at like keeping up with new music and all that type, especially in like rap and hip hop. I was really good at that for a while, but mostly like I grew up on punk music, so that's typically what I listen to. But it's pretty much split between like that and hip hop. But I listen to all kinds of stuff. Trying to think of like new music that I've been into recently. I'll try to find something on Spotify. What have you guys been into?
You know, it's funny, like I just listened to that new Zach Fox album. It's like he makes more like kind of like meme kind of.
I don't even know it. Like,
yeah, he's hilarious. Like he's actually a comedian and writer, but like he also does music on the side for fun. And like he dropped like an actual product for once, and it was like, it's actually pretty killer. So
nice.
Yeah, but outside of that, usually like underground hip hop or some kind of ambient pop music, just something like that.
Yeah, I've been trying to find more of like, I used to listen to this a lot like freshman, sophomore year of college, but listening to more, my friend had reminded me of like Washed Out and like Com Truise and like that kind of music. So I've been listening to more of that, like ambient type of stuff. But yeah, what about you, Sid?
Man, I'm the same. I used to keep up with everything, and now I don't as much. I'm weird. I'm a weird mix between like house and hip hop / I've been listening to a lot of this guy, Vin J. He's like kind of new on the scene and just publishes a ridiculous amount of music. Like for someone who's whatever up and coming, like has something new every.
So you got to do.
Yeah, right. It's like the way to win. So I thought like it's got an interesting or like a fresh approach, but yeah, somewhere between house, rap, and then I kind of just listen to my old playlist. Like I need to update that.
Yeah, I've noticed that was the thing that I was like, I really tried to discipline myself on when I was freelancing for the first time of like, that's where I like really drew the connection between, and I was like living by myself at the time, and it's really easy to just get into the same exact like routine or like content routine where you're watching the same, I'll throw The Office on while I'm eating or like something like that. It's like I'm watching the same stuff over and over again. And the same thing applied to music. Like I definitely felt like if I'm listening to the same playlist over and over again, like it's harder to be more creative. And so forcing myself to listen to, like the Discover Weekly or whatever the, Spotify playlist is going to push my way, and just finding out like, or just like I've been reaching out to friends more recently. I'm like, hey, give me some weird music that even if like you don't listen to it. And that's definitely like, it's definitely like helped like mentally for sure of just getting more creative on it. Oh, I got one. I'm a big fan of Isaiah Rashad.
Oh yeah.
Nice. And so his latest album is, I'm a huge fan of it. That song that I think it's the second song on the track. The song he has with Lil Uzi Vert is great.
Yeah, that's a great album. Well, yeah, I guess before we kind of head to our main go-to question, I guess the thing I'm noticing throughout this conversation is like this balance between business and creativity. I'm kind of curious, like what like percentage, if you were like make a percentage, like how you look at business and creativity, is it for you like 50-50, like you want to be creative and more business oriented, or like what's it look like to you then and kind of now, if that makes sense?
I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So would you define, because I think you can be very creative in business, so is like logic or something like that more of a better term for business, or like data driven or something like, or am I just misunderstanding?
No, I think that makes sense. So yeah, that definitely applies to like the kind of logic, data oriented kind of, the logic side of business and the kind of more creativity side for you.
Yeah, that's I love having that conversation, especially with other marketers, because like there's never an answer, right? There's never one answer, and it's very situational and things like that. I think people, this ties in with like the MarTech revolution and having just the democratization of like analytics on like social media platforms, and like people, like the base population just getting a better understanding of like marketing and data and how people engage with each other. I think people are increasingly putting an overemphasis on data in a lot of situations, and are undervaluing the creativity or like that gut reaction to things. People want to, everything can be boiled down to a science. That doesn't mean it should. So, I think it's entirely circumstantial and in which direction you go. But I think it's always a balance, but people put a lot of emphasis on data. I think for most startups or small businesses, like go with whatever your customer is telling you is good. Like that's it. Doesn't matter. It's like, oh, but our click rates are so good on this thing. It's like, yeah, but our customers are telling us that like they hate this thing that we're pushing them. So like, what? But again, that's also data, right? So, I think it's a balance.
Yeah. And like, and going with data, like I remember you told me this kind of random thought just popped in my mind from a conversation we had before, like how I think one of your managers told you, like when it comes to analytics and marketing and data, like he told you that, the best thing you can do if you want to get into more marketing analytics type of role is to get an MBA, and in 5 years you can name your price. Yeah.
So that was in a meeting when I was an intern at Axiom. I had met with our president within the first week or two of me getting brought on, and it was just me and him in his office, and he was just asking me questions about me and where I'm from and all that type of stuff. And then he just like straight up said, the best career advice I can give you for marketing, if you want to keep pursuing it, is get a master's in analytics or marketing analytics, and you can name your price in 5 years. And so I wasn't out of school yet at this point, but I had been working very hard in school to get out as early as possible, because I just viewed school. I've always been a good student, but I very much viewed school as like a barrier to just do other things. And so he's telling me this. I'm like, no, man, don't tell me I got to go back now. But I don't regret any decisions there. But he was 100% correct. Now, so that was in 2016, and now you see like marketing analyst or those types of roles like start at 100K at like most large businesses. I have a friend who quite literally named his price, and he got hired on the spot.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I look at Connor, I look at some of the people out here, like you can get that same experience and mindset from just working and getting paid to learn. So like, I don't know. I'm of a very similar belief as Connor. Like I wanted to get out of school once I got in, but like now I'm at a place after, operating and being in business for a few years where I'm like, yeah, it would be refreshing to maybe like go back to school and like even consider a career in academia. So like I could see it, but at the same time, it's almost like if I want to teach someone, I want to make sure that I can do it first, right? Like that's where I've gotten some of the best teachers and, even learning experiences. So yeah, it's a tough one to straddle, but like I could see myself doing it in the future. But like at the end of the day, that 5-year track versus like just working for 5 years, like I don't see it being that different, because either or, you just have to learn how to try new stuff, especially as a marketer, and fail often, and see.
Yeah, so and know the people, right? And that's where like there's a huge benefit to not just going to college, but also just like getting your master's degree or whatever. It's like once you go into an MBA program, you're then in an upper echelon of like industry network, right? Like you're dealing with more people who are practitioners. You're dealing with more people who actually have like direct career experience, and like versus like a lot of marketing professors that could have been out of the game for 20, 30 years or something like that, right? I think it's an ever evolving topic, like should you go to college or not? And I think it's the value prop of American colleges right now is very much in flux, because there's so much free information on the internet. But yeah, I think it's just kind of whatever works best for people, whatever decision they go down. At the end of the day, it's like it's show, don't tell. And that's what's going to build trust. That's what's going to grow your career.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what is your take on that? Like, if you were to advise someone, like, let's say, fresh out of college, or even during, like, even before, like, after high school, like, what would be that, like, advice to kind of go on if you don't want to pursue college, or if college is the right route?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends on, like, your discipline, right? Like, I wouldn't trust, a doctor or something like that. I guess you can't even get your doctorate, right? Like, so there's like that side, right? You can't become an internet doctor, even though I'm sure there's plenty of them. But for something like marketing, or even like I talk to a lot of students with like career stuff, hence like my newsletter. But if they have an idea of what they want to do, then college can be a great place for that. Also, if they just want to experience a new place, or meet new people, or get out of the house, whatever that is, I think college is a great environment for that. I think more and more, if they're not feeling aspirational towards that, or if they're not in the financial situation to do that, or things, whatever, it's easier than ever to not have a college degree and be successful. It will be increasingly easier to do that over time. That being said, we do live in a society that holds value to that, and there are systems in place that provide a lot of value there. Like I wouldn't have started this career, I wouldn't have gone into marketing if I never went to college, probably, just because I met people that were marketing students, and I asked them about their courses, and I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting. So yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's entirely situational. But if you just want to if you don't know what you want to do, and you just want to make cool YouTube videos, or you want to just study on your own for a while you work at home, or help your dad with his lawn care business, whatever it is, you can do that and end up making a lot more money than people around you, and being a lot happier, or something like that. So I think it's easier than ever, but it's a line in tow.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of learning, I see someone you're someone that's constantly learning things all the time. I saw the post you made recently about getting those HubSpot certifications, and you're always learning different tools and different like softwares and things of that nature. Like what inspires you to do that? If you don't mind me asking, where's your thought process of learning these different things? And
I think
then
part of it is,
oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Go for it.
No, I was gonna say from there too, how do you know when to learn something and then apply it? Just hold on to it,
Yeah, so I think part of it's kind of what Sid said. It crosses my mind every now and then to go back to school and things like that, or even pursuing some sort of job in academia and being in that situation. I think that's enticing for something especially those HubSpot certifications. That was something where I know that product inside and out. So I'm it's stupid for me to not do these, because I've just worked so much in that platform, and I'm just a big fan of the company, where I'm this is a no-brainer, for me to just do this. So over the course of the last 2 weeks, I've gotten 9 certifications or something from there. And I've just been cracking them out. But for, a few months ago, I wanted to start to learn more SQL and more Tableau. stuff. So I was doing like data camp classes on that and looking into some like code academy stuff. I think because that was like a very new topic for me, I was just less motivated about it. Like I got through some intro courses and things like that, but in terms of like the daily practicing, which is what I wanted to commit to, that's sort of broken down because to the second part of it, your question, like I didn't have an actual tangible thing to apply that to. Like, yes, I can talk about that. I can talk about my journey learning SQL because I'm sure everyone wants to hear that. But I am very much someone, to my detriment sometimes, where I'm not going to do something unless there's like actual value or like actual thing. So sometimes I shoot myself in the foot with that thinking instead of just like doing something for the sake of doing it. But yeah, I think it's a tough thing to motivate yourself for me at least, if I'm not going to like apply it. Like one of my like pandemic like hobbies that I wanted to try out was to learn Morse code. And just because I thought that'd be a funny thing to know. And I did it for I was really consistent with it for about like 6 weeks, and then like didn't do it for a couple days, didn't do it for another week, and then I haven't like picked it up since. So because like I'm never going to apply Morse code to real life, but I thought that'd be a funny thing to do.
I think that's a perfect segue to our last question. We always do this, Connor, and it's we've gotten some really interesting responses, and I'm curious what you'll say. So the question is, how do you define creativity? What does it mean to you?
That's a good question. I think, it can manifest itself in a lot of ways. I look at it, I think one of the more like tangible definitions that comes to mind is a couple things. One is, this idea of like, true creativity, like creating something from nothing. Right. But I think in practice, in most places that doesn't exist. Everyone is just ripping off of each other, which is also totally okay. But also being able to connect very different things together, like connect different ideas or different topics, different people, different, whatever it is, and create a connection between things that people can understand. And that is ideally like novel in a sense or something like that. I think that's sort of one of the foundations to just like strategy, like principles or strategy principles, things like that, just connecting ideas and bringing them together.
Yeah.
You also probably tell everybody that that's a good answer,
No,
Yeah,
but
right?
it's interesting. It's like actually people provide different perspectives on this. It just depends on like their background, their, experiences and interests. So, but not all answers are the same, so it's like, it is unique what people can share. So I know you have a newsletter coming up, like what's other areas people can follow you or reach out?
Yeah, people can reach out, follow me on Twitter, Connor_Skelly_. I'm going to be launching a newsletter called Catch All. It's a newsletter for budding marketers. It's primarily for marketing students or recent marketing grads or people just starting in the marketing field. That will, every week, I'll cover a different topic of marketing, kind of hitting on this generalist trope that I can't seem to get away from. And even though I don't want to. And just intro level, surface level each week, hitting on a different topic. And I'll be highlighting people or resources each week that go deeper into the topic that I'm talking about.
Awesome. Well, Connor, thank you so much for your time and hope you enjoyed the show as much as we did.